The way we would like to have this panel session, let me kind of go over that, and then I'll make a few introductory remarks. First, of course, a very distinguished panel. I'm honored to be a member of it. We have the Canadian Ambassador to the United States, Doer, just to my left. We have Mr. Héctor Márquez Solís, who is the head of the energy unit for the Mexican Ministry of Economy. And then on my far left, we have Jody, Elliot, who is the president of Oxy Oil and Gas. So a distinguished group. I'm going to make a few remarks, then I'll ask each of the gentlemen on the panel to make a few comments as well. And then we'll get into a panel discussion. That'll include some questions and hopefully some spontaneous interaction among the members of this group. And then at the latter part of the session, we want to leave this open for questions from the audience. So I would encourage you to be thinking perhaps about questions you might want to ask this group. We will have people with handheld microphones. I would ask you when you ask your question to state who you are and who you represent, and we will go from there. When I was thinking about coming to this meeting, it struck me that connectedness is a key theme. And I think there's three key points that are reflected in the Border Energy Forum. One is all three countries are connected by geology. Geology doesn't actually know very much about the borders, but North America has, in many ways, the richest and most extensive set of energy resources in the world. I'll make a couple of comments about that. Secondly, we're connected, deeply connected, by our history together in the energy business. And then finally, what we're really about, I guess, at this forum, we're connected by opportunities. Let me talk just a bit about the connected geology. If you look at, for example, the oil and gas resource base, crosses borders in several places. We share the same geological environment between the United States and Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico. We share the geological environment, as was pointed out, in South Texas. We share the geological environment in the northern tier of the U.S., extending into Alberta and Saskatchewan and Canada. So we have a long set of, not surprisingly, historical relationships that are built around that. We also share, for example, the solar resources. The desert southwest of the U.S. and northern Mexico, one of the premier solar resources on the planet. And as was pointed out, we share wind resources. Canada is a primary supplier of hydroelectric power to the northeast U.S. from Quebec Hydro. We're connected by history. It's interesting to note, 1901, that year was actually a sort of particularly unique date in the sense that first exploration well was drilled in Alberta, and the first oil production in Mexico was actually started by a gentleman from Los Angeles named Edward Doheny, who had been involved in the development of the LA Basin. In the 1930s, activity in the oil business was in spite of the Depression, was quite vigorous in all three countries. Of course, in 1938, you had a major event in the history of the oil business in North America with the formation of Pemex. In 1947, right after the war, the discovery of Leduc, first giant oil field discovered in Alberta. And on it goes. And in 1994, not an oil event, but I hope we get into some discussion about this. We were talking about it a little bit before. 1994, NAFTA came into being, which certainly has had major impacts in several sectors of the economy, but I think does create an important framework not only for direct economic activity, but I think with respect to potentially the exchange of intellectual capital. So let me finish my short comments on being connected by opportunity. First and foremost, if you're talking about energy, one of the significant events, as was mentioned before, is the energy reform in Mexico, and the opportunity to change the future with respect to the investment of capital, potentially transfer of technology as well. That brings me to the point about technology and people. My personal experience in the oil business was having had the opportunity to live and work in several countries. And I think anyone that's been involved in that will tell you that what you discover is the important commonalities and the important differences and the distinctiveness of those cultures and how that is part of the history of the energy business. I think there are more opportunities there as time goes on, and hopefully maybe we'll get into that discussion. Technology transfer, ongoing, certainly in the oil and gas industry, a rather almost seamless connection has been in operation for decades with respect to Canada and the U.S. oil industry. I think there are opportunities coming from both energy reform in Mexico as well as this framework of cooperation, as we heard from the mayor, for technology transfers to perhaps be increased and enhanced with respect to Canada, U.S., and with Mexico. So to sum it all up, my comments, the United States, Canada, and Mexico have been connected in the energy business for a long time. Connected by nature, being blessed with, in North America, with arguably the most diverse, most extensive energy resource base on the planet. And we've been connected by history for a century. And I think today we sit with a whole new class of opportunities, potentially, where we can bring those opportunities together and build North America as a model for the energy industry in the world. So with that, Ambassador, would you care to give a few remarks?
Well, thank you. Should we stay in our chairs?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
These are very soft chairs. I feel like I'm on Oprah. Buenos dias, bonjour, good morning. Thank you very much, Don, for your introduction. I'm pleased to be joined with our Consul General from Los Angeles, James Villeneuve, who many of you know. And it's also interesting timing for our border energy meeting because Canada, United States, and Mexico were part of a draft agreement on Trans-Pacific Partnership that was just completed in about 10 days ago in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, Canada and Mexico, 5 years ago, were tipping our toes in the water of TPP, of whether it would be an advantage for us to join the negotiations. We indicated our desire to join at the APEC meeting in Hawaii with President Obama, and from that time on, we've been working together as 3 countries as part of the 12-country Trans-Pacific Partnership to negotiate this agreement. I do believe that this will have tremendous benefit for citizens in all our countries, but after you get an agreement, you have a job to do to also identify those benefits and the long-term vision that is contained within that. In terms of energy, I'm also very, very optimistic about our cooperative opportunities moving into the future. You know, as a Canadian ambassador, you turn on the news in the United States, A lot of it is some interesting political discussions going on from time to time and competitors for various offices. But every day, I think, since I've been here, there's been news about further turmoil, conflict, and decisions that are made by allied countries, including Canada, United States, and Mexico, of how to keep our world safer, and in particular, how to deal with the turmoil in the Middle East. And it seems to me that we have this ability to go beyond just the battles of energy versus the environment in North America, the battle of the one-trick ponies from each project by project, to having a longer-term energy independent strategy in this North American neighborhood, which I believe has a tremendous appeal to our citizens in all three countries. And when you contrast that with the potential and the historical developments of petro-dictators determining sometimes the energy and environmental policies in this neighborhood, I think we have the ability to grab this vision, grab this populism in this neighborhood of North America on energy and the environment. For those of us in Canada, that means that we work together on a number of elements that will not only provide greater reliability and affordability of energy, but also provides benefits for cleaner air and cleaner water. We believe there's 4 elements in an energy independent strategy. Number 1 is energy efficiency, and you look at the cooperation between Canada, United States, and Mexico on building Cadillacs in Mexico, Ford Edges in Canada, and what should I say, GMs in the United States, and having tailpipe emission standards that actually started in California and was adopted by a number of provinces to have greater energy efficiency. Number 2 is renewables, and for us, we are pleased that after 20 years of arguing and proposing that hydropower that is shipped from British Columbia down to California, from Manitoba down to Wisconsin, from Quebec down through the northeastern states, that it be defined as we do internationally as a renewable energy and be part of solar, wind, hydro, geothermal as part of a renewable portfolio in our neighborhood. Number 3 is the development of gas in a safe way and the shipment of gas north and south and east and west. The benefit of that, of course, is to displace coal where there is not enough of renewable energy. It will be part of the mix. And lastly, of course, is the development of oil. And for Canada, you know, a few years ago, I think in 2009, we shipped about 19% of the foreign oil to the United States. Today, we're at 44% of foreign oil. Now, it's on a smaller base, but it's still a significant change that is taking place. And of course, we're very encouraged by the reforms that are taking place in Mexico and the opportunities that represents for our neighborhood. And we're very also encouraged by not only the 4 elements that we see as part of an energy strategy, but if you just look at the latest quadrennial report that was produced by the Department of Energy, it does speak to opportunities and advantages of a North American energy environmental strategy. The first time ever we've seen a document from the White House and the Department of Energy that goes beyond project by project and goes to a broader vision that certainly Canada endorses to bring energy independence through action in the North American neighborhood. So those would be our preliminary comments on this very, very interesting panel, and I look forward to working and discussing these issues with my colleagues on this panel today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Héctor.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and sorry for my entrance. I think that reflects what the Minister of Economy is happening on the energy reform in Mexico. As you know, in Mexico is taking place a lot of changes. The energy market, the energy policy is changing dramatically. We are moving from having just one company in the oil sector and one company in the electricity sector to a market that is fully open to the investment, to new participants, to new entrants. And in the previous years, one thing that it was missing in that equation was part of the industrial policy behind that. I mean, we don't have right now, and I'm very open on that, we don't have an oil industry, a Mexican oil industry. We have right now, or we used to have, just suppliers of Pemex. And each one was looking after their contract, their particular suppliers, and their particular activity. But we really didn't develop what we can call a Mexican oil industry. And that's what the Ministry of Economy right now and the Secretary Guajardo is trying to transform in Mexico. Secretary Guajardo has a vision of trying to really create these companies in Mexico who are global players, who really can follow what we have done, for example, in the auto industry, in the aerospace industry, in many other industries. Secretary Guajardo really wants to have a Mexican oil industry that is global, competitive, and it can be a player in the energy market in all the sectors. And that's what the reform in Mexico brings for us. And it's the responsibility of Secretary Guajardo and us who are part of that team to start building that manufacturing base, that technology base, that industrial policy, so that we can have this supply chain, these opportunities being created for the domestic suppliers, for the Mexican workers, for the qualified, for the transfer of technology, and everything that implies an industrial policy. And that's what we are trying to do. Of course, at these times, and I will not get into detail because you know best what is happening on the energy market. The oil prices are coming in a very critical situation when we are launching our energy reform, and that complicates many things. And even the possibility of the U.S. becoming an exporter of oil changed pretty much the perspective of the energy market, and many other factors that are relevant to this sector. But even on that, I think Secretary Guajardo, and I can say the overall government of Mexico and President Peña Nieto is really looking beyond those factors. And we are adjusting the budget, whatever we have to do, but we have to go beyond that. You are very familiar with the contracts, with the bidding process that the Ministry of Energy have been doing so far. You are certainly familiar with the expansion plans of gas that the electricity, the CFE, Comisión Federal de Electricidad, is planning for the future. We are really have very ambitious plans for expanding our gas transportation system, and that is going to change the face of what Mexico can achieve in terms of the energy market in itself, but also the industrial policy around that. Just last week, Secretary Caldwell just opened the new gasoduct that is going to Los Mochis, Topolobampo, who opens a new set of possibilities of industrial development, of economic development on that area. The transmission lines is growing very rapidly. The new generation plants are being transformed to combined cycle. There is a lot going on, and that is open for new investment, for new players, for new technology. And we want the best companies to come into Mexico. We want the best technology to come into Mexico. We are, as the Ministry of Economy, we are ready to help those companies to set that investment, to develop the human capital necessary for that. And we have created a set of instruments and to support the foreign investors to get into Mexico with the best they can offer to the energy market. CFE, Pemex is also in a big transformation, and you will see more and more, even in those critical times, Pemex is going to keep moving in terms of their activity. They are important plants of being electricity generators. They are going to be a very huge player in terms of gas transportation and distribution. So everything is really a big opportunity in Mexico. And when you say that, you have to look at also not only the opportunity in Mexico in itself as a closed market, the opportunities come when you start thinking as a region. Right now, we are having a huge trade in the oil sector with the United States. We are just having a new pattern on trade in terms of gas. We are opening new channels of communication in terms of electricity. The electricity is being sold back and forth. Gas is being sold back and forth. Oil, naftas, gasolines are being sold back and forth. And I think that's really what eventually what we want to really get in the medium term. We really want to have a full set of, if you look at the map of the region, you will see, obviously, the Mexican system has a lot to catch up in order to be integrated, fully integrated in the gas system into the US, for example. We have just pieces in Mexico. We are first trying to connect those pieces within Mexico so that the whole Mexican system can really connect to the US system. And that's for electricity, gas, oil, and so on. Now, the new exploration opportunities that are opening in the Gulf of Mexico, the deep waters, the ultra deep waters, are a new set of opportunities to develop in terms of refining capacity and transportation of oil and gas and so on. I mean, I can continue and list the full set of opportunities that are being created in Mexico. And the Ministry of Economy and Secretary Guajardo is really trying to capitalize those opportunities for the Mexican companies, and not for the suppliers of Pemex. We really want to create those companies that can sell to Shell, to Pemex, to Exxon, to Mobil, to Chevron. We want those investment in the electricity who can sell in different communities, different regions, who set transmission lines, whatever is more attractive and economic. That's the goal of Secretary Guajardo, in which these companies can sell in Mexico and really capitalize with technology with the best players in Mexico. And we are just new in this sector. We are just entering in this activity. But we have the experience, Secretary Guajardo has the experience to work on this industrial promotion. He's been very successful in bringing into Mexico huge investments in terms of the automotive industry, aerospace, pharmaceuticals, and the foreign investment in Mexico keeps growing year by year. But Secretary Guajardo is also very keen for the global context, for the regional context. He's one of the main drafters of the NAFTA. He's been working since he was congressman, working with the US and Canada in many issues. He understands very well the importance of the region on the geopolitical terms. So I just want to transmit to you this set of opportunities, this set of key time in this process that represent Mexico. And this has to be capitalized by the Mexican suppliers, by the Mexican companies, but also by the companies on the region. This is what we are bringing into the table and offering to all the companies that are willing to do business in Mexico. Thank you.
Jody.
Don, thank you for the introduction earlier, and I look forward to continuing the discussion with our fellow panelists here today. I represent Occidental Petroleum Corporation. We go by the name Oxy. It's actually our stock symbol, but so the short name for Occidental Petroleum is Oxy. And I want to use the few minutes I have here at the beginning maybe to introduce the company, because many of you may not be familiar with Oxy because we don't have a refining and marketing. We don't sell gasoline, so our name may not be familiar to some of you. But Oxy is a large international oil and gas company. We operate in the United States, which is the part of the business that I'm responsible for, the Middle East, and in Latin America. We have a midstream business, oil marketing, NGLs, condensate, gas. We generate power, generate 1,500 megawatts of power through 3 different cogen facilities that we both consume and can market, as well as our OxyChem subsidiary, where we manufacture vinyls, caustic soda, and chlorine, kind of 3 key chemical products. So we're a large company. We're headquartered in Houston and one of the largest oil and gas producers based on kind of market cap. At the end of 2014, we employed 40,000. We had 40,000 employees and contractors worldwide. About 16,000 of those work in the state of Texas, which, again, we're very proud to be in the state of Texas. We're principally, though, an oil and gas producer, and our core operation is in the Permian Basin, both Texas and southeast New Mexico, where we're the largest oil producer there in that region. We're a world leader in enhanced oil recovery technology, specifically CO2 flooding. We have over 24 large CO2 floods in the Permian Basin that continue to extract additional oil from mature oil fields. In fact, that's kind of what we're known for, is these large oil fields and continuing to find efficient economic ways to recover oil that's in place. You know, internationally, we're regarded as kind of the premier company doing major big projects, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit later about the joint venture we have with Mexichem at our Ingleside Energy facility. Oxy's more of an oil company than a gas company. About 75% of our reserves are oil. 60% of the production's from the U.S. and about 40% is internationally. We have a high regard. One of our core values is integrity, and in that integrity core value comes things like environmental stewardship and safety. Our employee safety record is one of the best in the industry. It's about a 1/6. The incident rate is about 1/6 of what you would see as an average for all U.S. industries, and it's about a 1/3 of the oil and gas extraction industry. So we're very proud of the company, and maybe that helps kind of set the stage for our conversation later this morning. And again, we want to thank the Border Energy Forum, the GLO, and Commissioner Bush for providing the opportunity to come and visit today.
Very well. Well, let me start by throwing out a question that's certainly a hot topic, Ambassador, as you know, in Washington, D.C. these days, the issue of U.S. oil exports or not. But it's interesting, as I think as many people in this audience know, that, of course, oil exports have been a mainstay of the Canadian industry as well as Pemex. So from the perspective of an exporter, when you look at this debate and you look at what's going on, do you have any comments about how we perhaps should look at this issue in the U.S.?
Well, I think that in Canada we have a rule on exporting energy, as you know, and the rule is that if you have to meet your domestic demand, and then you can apply to export to other markets. And there is a lot of cooperation going on. In fact, at Toluca, the three leaders met, and from that flowed it was actually in the middle of the riots in Kiev, and from that, the Russian aggression in Crimea, there has been a joint effort to export gas to Ukraine, and I do believe that there's an opportunity and a populism, in fact, to export products to certain countries that may, for geopolitical reasons, it may make a lot of sense to reduce Russian exports and dependency of people that receive those exports to be removed somewhat by filling in the gaps with Canada and the United States and other countries and Mexico. On oil itself, we're not sure where that debate's going to go in the United States. I don't know, you know, we've stayed out of that debate except to explain what our policy is. I think there's a lot of work to do politically before there is more. There are individual export licenses granted, but there's not a macro strategy. And I don't think that will happen, in my view, before the presidential election. That would be my honest assessment of it. Something controversial that doesn't usually happen in the middle of or in this period of time, but who am I to judge what may happen? But I think we need populism to deal with the populism of energy security. And that's why I think unique opportunities represent themselves, you know, to deal with Ukraine, for example, and that's what we're cooperating on with the Department of Energy in the U.S., and that was a topic that President Peña Nieto, Prime Minister Harper, and President Obama discussed in Toluca just a little while ago.
Héctor, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, just to mention that we are actually right now benefiting for a special permit that we have from the President Obama on allowing U.S. exports into Mexico of certain type of oil. And the reason is that as we are in Mexico reconfiguring some of the refineries, we need some light oils to do some mixing and use some capacity on the Mexican refinery so that heavy oils can be shipped into the U.S. And the light oils are more economically profitable process in Mexico. So this is how we are operating under this special agreement. Of course, Mexico is an oil exporter. That's we export basically about 80%, 90% of what we produce. But as our refining capacity, as our production capacity on Pemex is increased in the medium term, and as new players come into Mexico, we are just last week are discussing a new drafting in terms of regulations in trying to set some provisions on in what circumstances our exports can be adjusted, limited, or controlled in some way, because we anticipate that domestic supply it will be very important to make or to guarantee the new investors that they will have the oil supply available so that new investment in new refineries can be operated in full capacity. So this is the provision is in the U.S. will have, obviously, if there were the case that U.S. really have this opening and on the exports, we will enter into a new set of competition for the U.S. light oil that the refiners in Mexico will require. And that will create a new pricing mechanism in Mexico, how the U.S.-Mexico oil is being traded. So those factors we are analyzing, because what we are looking forward, our main interest is to make sure that if new investment come into Mexico for refineries or for new processing facilities, oil, they will have the oil available from our own fields instead of buying oil from other sources. So we want to secure that oil into our installed capacity. So I mean, there is a lot of implications. Obviously, we just analyzing from the outside that decision, but just to mention that we are benefit right now for that provision, and if it opens, it will change a little bit on the pricing mechanism in Mexico.
Jody, do you have any comments?
And we just happen to have a lot of light crude we'd be glad to, to talk about. So it's really one of the most topical, important issues facing us as a country right now, I think. You know, if you look back in the history, American crude oil is the only commodity that you can't export from the United States. And we're the only country that has that restriction. So when you look back at the law, why is there a law that prevents the export of crude oil? It was at a time of scarcity. It was during the Arab oil embargo, and so passing that law really had no effect, given the fact that there was a scarcity in supply. But roll forward to today, through some real advancements in technology, directional drilling, horizontal drilling, hydraulic fracturing, we've opened new resources, tremendous resources in the U.S., and because of and most of those unconventional developments are light crude, high gravity crude. And so now you have a disconnect between the U.S. refining base and what it was built to do and the type of crudes it was built to refine, and this massive influx of light oil. So there's a disconnect between the world price of crude oil and domestic. Gasoline's priced different. Gasoline's exported and is priced on the world price. So I think there's three real benefits that can occur here with allowing the export of crude oil. One of those, and I think Ambassador, you already mentioned, was by having that reliable source of crude oil, we can provide the energy source to our allies. We can take away the ability of energy to be used as a weapon. The economic development, because you have this depressed price differential, there's unconventional shale development that's not occurring. And if we can find a way to balance that load of heavy oil and light oil in the U.S. refining, I think you'll see more development in the unconventionals. And that's higher royalties, higher tax revenues. I mean, there's all kinds of benefits there. And the last thing, I think, is a benefit to consumers, because it will stabilize the market. The more the market can be stable, I think the more confidence people will have in being able to predict and look forward to crude prices. So clearly it's something I think we feel important for the oil industry to happen.
Yeah, I think just a quick comment on myself on this question, that if you really look holistically at the North American let's say the oil supply chain, natural resource development through manufacturing and producing products. It has, I don't remember a time in my 40 years where there's actually been as much change as we've seen in the last little while, with the revitalization of the U.S. resource base, with the ongoing development of the world's largest unconventional resource base, which is the oil sands in Alberta, and then the exciting opportunities open up to what are highly prospective basins in Mexico. So if you put all of those together and then you put together the changes in the refining base, I think the idea, as you said, Ambassador, the idea of really a robust, secure system for North America is there for the taking. Now, there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of political complexity, and I know people sometimes get discouraged by this, but you know, when I started off talking about history, the energy business takes time. It's big, and 10 years is not that long, and because you're talking about things that go on for a very long period of time.
And if you allow me just a quick comment, this is especially important for the border region, especially in Mexico. You look at all the investments that are done in gas, for example, in Mexico. They are, those projects are economically viable given the U.S. price. I mean, and we take the reference as the U.S. pricing. So any changes that take place in the U.S. in the pricing of gas or other alternative fuels, it really impact on the profitability of the projects on the border. In fact, just the project to bring gas from Texas to Veracruz to the Gulf of Mexico is profitable because given the U.S. prices on gas. So if the supply of energy in the U.S. changes, the mix, the relative price of the different sources will change, and that will have an effect. We don't know what type of effect, but will have an effect on the profitability of the projects that are built on the region. And that's, even the Los Ramones, which built in Nuevo León, is sourcing gas from the U.S., and that project was built given the U.S. prices, basically. So this has a huge implication for Mexico in general, but for the border region, is particularly relevant to the movement of the prices that take place in the U.S.
I just had one more question, and then I would like to go to our audience. I'm sure we have some very good questions, but we've seen, shifting gears to the renewable side, we've seen tremendous growth in the Southwest U.S. and obviously driven by the significant decline in the cost of the technology. It's been a big driver, but also you have really a premier solar resource extending from Southern California all the way across the border into Texas, obviously extending also into Mexico. Hector, could you comment a minute about how do you see that kind of solar resource development taking place in Mexico? What do you see would drive that?
Well, as part of the energy reform, as you certainly know, there is this goal to have, on 2025, 35% of the electricity has to be sourced by alternative fuels. That's our goal, to have 35 of the electricity being sourced for this. Now, the energy policy to that is obviously implies a set of incentives in terms of creating a market, a certificate market. Is a legislation that is providing a lot of incentives to develop that industry so that we can meet that goal. And the Comisión Federal de Electricidad also have special programs for particular regions, especially in the northwest of Mexico. There are tremendous projects from Comisión Federal de Electricidad to purchase that electricity and to be distributed in the industrial part of Mexico, basically. The wholesale buyers is basically our primary market. I mean, we are not aiming to reach that goal in the home market, really. I mean, we're looking for the big sellers of that energy. So that's why the projects are large, are huge, it is in Tamaulipas, who is specializing in Chihuahua, specializing more in the eolic energy projects. There are also Chihuahua and Durango, very large projects on solar energy. But we are still in a very initial stage on that phase. I mean, we have those projects that even the largest project will not take us with enough capacity to really, in the current moment, to really make a big difference in terms of supply. I mean, this is a continuous process, and our legislation is designed to provide incentives to that type of energy. And also on the industrial side, we are changing a lot of the rules in terms of the trade so that companies can bring this equipment or this technology that is not available in Mexico with all the simplicity of the import, and they can install in Mexico and start creating this new capacity. So we are moving all the piece of legislation so that this sector can really have a big push on the as a sourcing of energy.
Well, let's take a question from the audience. Bright light, so trying to get someone have a question. There are handheld mics.
Yes, good morning. My name is Cecilia Guillon, and I work for Kyocera Solar. We manufacture photovoltaic modules in Tijuana. We're obviously a multinational corporation too, but for Mexico, you talked about, this is for the gentleman who just spoke, about the large scale being a focus, but we see a huge acceleration of the market in the commercial, industrial parts for self-consumption. Do you see distributed generation, smaller scale, playing a big role in the 35%?
Yeah, the smaller buyer, the commercial buyer, the law also provides some special mechanisms for the commercial or the smaller buyers. But and there are particular programs, the Ministry of Energy, under the law of transition of energy, that is Ley de Transición Energética, provides certain mechanisms, especially for the commercial and for the home sales and transportation distribution. But what the Ministry of Energy is right now concentrated and is really after is for the big wholesale market. And those are the big projects that we really want to start with so that we can create a large base of sourcing. But there is also special programs and especially for some, when it's jointly, for example, with cogeneration for a particular industry, particular facilities of the sector, they have special programs to provide incentives to that. But there is also, and we can certainly talk about later on the specifics of that.
Thank you. Jody, I'd like to ask you a question. Maybe get, everybody, is familiar, I think, in this audience for sure, with the rather incredible resource development that's occurred with development of shale resources built around technology and the practices wrapped around them. Obviously, we've seen that technology extend across, certainly it's a great deal of activity in Canada as well. How do you feel that that technology, about the technology transfer across borders with respect to shale technology? That'd be the first part. And the second question, what are the opportunities for North America to be a technology export base for shale development on a global basis?
Great question. I think you mentioned earlier that the U.S. and Canadian oil industry, there's been this flow of knowledge transfer over many, many years, and I think that probably is because there's access, right? There's access to the resource, and there's this natural flow of technology. I think the same thing can occur across other borders as well. But I think that's the beginning, is there has to be a foundation, a framework for profitable investments to occur. And I think the technology flow will follow that. I'm just amazed at the shale industry and what's occurred over the last 4 or 5 years, and the understanding of an unconventional reservoir, the geologic characterization of that reservoir, how to drill, how to complete, and watching cycle times go from a year from drill to put oil in the tank down to 45 days. Drilling wells in less than 15 days and completing them within 2 or 3 weeks later, and having crude flowing shortly after that. I mean, it's a testament to the industry's ability to innovate, and I think it can cross borders. It's just you have to have the right, I think, investment framework to kind of kick that off. And we've got a great example, I think, in the chemical business with Mexichem, right? You can use it as an example. OxyChem and Mexichem started out on a very small basis, providing EDC and VCM as feedstock to manufacturing PVC pipe and fittings. Started out small. In fact, we had a groundbreaking. There's a 50-50 joint venture with Mexichem in our Ingleside Energy Center. There was a groundbreaking last December where Commissioner Bush was there and talked about how that development can really provide economic development even further. It's a great example. But the relationship started a number of years ago, and it was a traditional supplier-customer relationship. And as Mexichem grew and expanded in Latin America and U.S., the two companies looked for ways, how can we do more? And so they worked tolling agreements and exchanges, and how do you coordinate production schedules to be more efficient? But I think, in that 2012 timeframe, they said, we really need to do something in a strategic way. So they kind of looked at the same conventional ones, but said, what we really need to do is to build a large-scale, world-class ethylene cracker together. And with the low-cost ethane from the Eagle Ford Shale development, again, leveraging that development, ethylene will get converted to EDC and VCM. It will go to Mexichem. So it'll be fully integrated from the wellhead to pipe and fittings, PVC pipe and fittings. And together, the companies will be able to leverage that world-class investment, because it uses ethane instead of higher cost oil and naphtha to produce the product. So I think that's a great example of how something small can grow into a real strategic relationship.
I think one aspect of technology transfer, as I mentioned, is the people. In my experience in the oil business, if you want to transfer technology, transfer people that know how to use it and know how to develop it. In Chevron, even though the Canadian workforce was a small share of its workforce, it was the largest expatriate workforce around the world. And there's a history of the Canadian oil business exporting its people on a global basis. Do we think, in the world that we've been talking about, a more integrated world, do we feel that our countries have the right structural frameworks to encourage this workforce flow, country to country?
I think we don't. We by, on an episodic basis or project by project basis, I think we do better. But this is in my view, this is one of the topics that both Mexico and Canada raised with the United States as part of our discussions in TPP, not only, you know, moving ahead on what is included in a trade agreement, but also the human resources that are part of that. And I have to say, it's complicated by the politics in the U.S., that probably all of you are aware of, on immigration policy. So we were encouraged with what happened in the Senate, but that didn't go anywhere in the House. This is just, I'm not talking politically, I'm just talking factually. And I think that we have the potential platform with TPP to talk about human resources and manage human resources in a more effective way than we have been doing it. But I think that it's still a work in progress, and it will be contingent upon getting a resolution on some areas of immigration here in the United States. And it's not just it's not just Canada, United States, and Mexico, but it's also, for example, if you look at California, if a person is getting an education here from another country in California and their education visa expires, they're then not allowed to stay in the United States, so we swoop in and try to bring them up to Canada. The United States taxpayers spend a lot of money educating them. Why not come to Canada? It's a little colder there maybe, but there's direct flights to Mexico every day in January and February to warm up a bit. So, and I noticed that Senator Hatch took that provision that we have in Canada and put it in the Senate immigration bill. So I would say there's a work in progress. I think the debate has to take place partially in this country, but we have the vision to do it. We have the tools to do it, but we are really short of the action to do what you've described properly, in my view.
Yeah.
Héctor, you have a comment?
Well,
about this?
if I may,
And this, certainly, Mexico and the U.S. in the energy sector, this exchange of talent has not been nearly as large as it has been in Canada and the U.S.
yeah, well,
Years.
if you read the law in Mexico on this reform, you will notice immediately that technology and training and human capital is of the most importance
Yes.
for the legislator who drafted this law. I mean, there are everywhere these provisions related to the building this capacity on technology and human capital. And this is also very important for us. And let me just give you the dilemma that we have right now in Mexico. We have, for example, institutions like the Instituto Mexicano del Petróleo, who is a big institution with tremendous capability, experience, and resources to provide training and do testing and provide a lot of service for the oil industry. But they used to be, the only client used to be Pemex, so they were working for the service of Pemex. So now we are giving this institute the role of really creating this based on the national basis to provide this curriculum, these programs to develop a training capability for the Mexican workers and Mexican professionals. And that implies a big transformation for that institute, and it's a big challenge. But a promising event, for example, 2 weeks ago, we were in Laredo, at the International University in Laredo, who are actually doing that, doing this transfer of professionals and creating these programs of exchanging students, taking advantage of the capability of the companies that are located in Texas, who are part of the important part of the university community, and they, through these universities who are located at the border, they are creating these tremendous beneficial programs for students and for professionals, creating this infrastructure to provide this training that is necessary to operate these binational projects or the Mexican projects. I think that, as the ambassador said, I mean, the tools, the infrastructure, and and the institutions are there, and we have them ready to jump, and we just have to keep bringing new programs, new projects, new initiatives to make them work on this collaborative basis.
Jody, do you have any
And-
comments about?
And if you get over the visa issues and the barriers, it works at a project level.
Yes.
I've got example after example. One of our strongest drilling contractors in our unconventional business is from Canada. And the transfer of knowledge of their experiences in Canada, applying it to the unconventional business, trying to, the 1 + 1 = 3 model. I've got example after example. So when you get over that structural issue, it works at the project level.
I think this is an integration opportunity. Obviously, these things take a long time because of the complexities we talked about. But if you really look at it, you look across the board at energy, oil, gas, renewables, hydroelectric power. There's no other place in the world that has all of these at the scale that exist here. That means to me that there's people, processes, and technologies to go with them that we should be able to actually look at North America as a primary exporter of energy, intellectual capital associated with energy of all kinds. So I think if we could do it ourselves, then that probably would help us do it more broadly as well. Let's take a question from the audience. Do we have another question? There's one over here.
This is Baman Yazdani with Texas A&M University. There are a lot of technologies that have been developed by Texas A&M and other universities in Texas, and I'm sure in Canada and Mexico, particularly on energy efficiency and renewable energy, as you were mentioning. And I loved what you were talking about, working together, the three countries, and then exporting this to all over the world, because we have the technologies. We give you an example. We have developed a technology to reduce energy usage from Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport by about 23% annually. This is millions of dollars. In fact, last 6 years it's been reduced by $23 million. This technology, and along with others, could be used by by the three countries here, and like you were talking about, exporting it. So what are the avenues for us to do exactly that? What is the avenue for us to provide this technology to other countries?
Well, I actually, last December, there was I think the first time in a long time, was a meeting of the three energy ministers or secretaries from our three countries. And out of that flowed the quadrennial report, which was very, very positive about the vision of North American cooperation on energy and both reliability and efficiency and renewables. And I actually believe we have a vehicle now with the three energy ministers working together on taking it from a press release to an action plan. And they're working in depth, not only with the industry, but also the industries in all three countries, but also with universities to even develop common data points. So I think the vehicle for the vision is the three energy secretaries with tasked by the presidents of two countries and a prime minister to get on with it, on going from, as I say, a press release to an action plan. So I think that is the vehicle, and I am very encouraged by developments lately on working in this neighborhood to get that, this North American neighborhood. I really think we have a lot more discussions going on now on action rather than, you know, just talking about it.
Yeah. Well, this is very important, especially in Mexico, and we are doing. Let me mention just two things. The biggest problem that we have found in Mexico with universities and research institutions is the marketability of their technology, their inventions. We changed the law early this year in which the universities can sell their inventions and get a profit, and the professors, the researchers at the university can get a part of that profit. That's a reform that we did early this year. Before that, the whatever profit the university kept, it was for the university, and the professor got nothing. So there was a little incentive for the professor to really make a marketable invention. It really didn't get the connection with the companies. And that's a big change that is taking place in Mexico, and that is already generating a lot of new invention. The other thing that we are doing is that the programs that we have in Mexico, for example, the CONACYT fund, the Science and Technology Council in Mexico, we found out that most of the funds for the research are being used by universities. And really there is about 2 or 3% of the funds are being used by the companies for the private sectors. That means that the private sector is not going to the government and asking for support in terms of financing to finance a project with a university that eventually will benefit the company. So the private companies are not using the research and development funds that we have in Mexico. It's just the universities. And what we're trying to do is to encourage more participation of the private companies to present projects to these funds that the government of Mexico has and use them for their own research projects in Mexico. One of the big problems that we've found is that the companies did not ask for those funds because whatever invention or whatever research they got, the owner of that research was the government because they provide the funds. So there was no incentive for the companies to ask for those funds because whatever research will be, the intellectual property will be the government. So we changed that. We changed that part of the intellectual property law so that we are just the financing of the research, but the intellectual property would be kept by the companies. I mean, those are the type of examples that we have to continually keep changing and adjusting to make sure that this energy form take place and keeps running and meet the goal that we are all expecting.
Well, our time has gone by very quickly, and I'm sure we could keep going for quite a while, but we are out of our time. I would like to ask the audience to give a hand to our distinguished panel.